Now, the next person doesn't really need an introduction, but I'll tell you, if you don't already know about her, Susan Slaughter she's been principal trumpet with the St. Louis Symphony for how many years? 37 years. She's the first woman in the world to ever be principal trumpet in a major symphony orchestra. And I think it's amazing, not only for that, but that she held her job for so long. There are lots of people that do that don't last as long as she did. And she still plays great. And even though she's retiring, you'll enjoy her concert. We've heard the quintet rehearse the last 2 days, and it's going to be great. So I know you're going to enjoy her talk. So let's welcome Susan.
Thank you very much. Well, I went to St. Louis in 1969. Just prior to that, I was in Indiana University, like a lot of you, in school. And it was 1967. I was getting ready to graduate, and my teacher said, well, you need to start applying for jobs. And so I wrote out a whole bunch of letters, about 30 letters, and sent them out. And I signed Susan Slaughter, and please let me know about your opening. And there were many, many openings that year. I received 3 invitations. One was the Milwaukee Symphony. Another was the North Carolina Symphony. And the last one was the Toledo Symphony. The Milwaukee Symphony, that was my first audition, and I played like a junior high player. So I thought, wow, I was on the plane flying back. What am I doing? I probably should have gotten that education degree. Well, I have 2 more auditions, so I took the North Carolina audition, and I just made one mistake on the transposition, and the conductor said, would you play this again? And somehow I just didn't catch it, probably a little nervous. So I made the same mistake again now. Whether that kept me from getting the job, I don't know. But then I had one last audition, so I played well for North Carolina. I thought, okay, things are looking up. And then the last audition was for the Toledo Symphony. And in those days, lots of times all you saw was the conductor, maybe the personnel manager, and certainly there were no curtains. So I played in Toledo on their stage, and the conductor wanted to hear Zarathustra. And everybody knows Zarathustra? Okay, in the middle is a call that goes from third space C to high C. Bum, ba-dum, bum. So he asked me to play that, and I, kind of set yourself. Bum, ba-dum, bum. And I said, I saw him nodding. He said, would you play it again? Okay. So I played like about 5 times and did not miss it. And finally I said, he asked me to play it again. I said, I'm sorry, is there something that you would like different? And he said, no, I just can't believe that you can hit it every time. So later on I'll talk about this, but obviously consistency is very important. Well, first off, I want to thank Jeff for inviting me to be part of his camp. It has been a real pleasure to know a lot of you so far, and if I haven't met you, please make sure that we meet before we depart the camp tomorrow night. And because I'd like to get to know all of you a little bit, and probably easier for you to track me down than it is for me to track you down. So Jeff asked me to talk about the music business and an orchestra job in particular, because that would be my expertise. I wouldn't be able really to talk too much about freelance playing, because I am just now entering the freelance world, per se. So this we could call it preparation for an orchestra career. So I'm going to probably simplify this a little bit, but I'd rather start at the beginning and take you through everything I think that you need to have for to develop your technique as an orchestral player, rather than assume you know some things and leave something out that might be very important for you. So a student who makes a career choice and decides to become an orchestral musician is really, really similar to a doctor who decides to specialize. We know a doctor goes to school, learns all the basics for a medical degree, and then he or she decides to specialize and become, let's say, a surgeon. More training is necessary with specialized instruments using certain techniques for that person to become a surgeon. Well, the same parallel can be applied to really any music student that wants to become an orchestral player, but especially if you are a brass player, and in particular a horn or trumpet, we have some things that we need to do that maybe, say, the tuba player may not have to do, or trombonist may not have to do as much. So a student goes to school, learns all the basics, especially we're talking about the Claude Gordon technique, which is just super. I studied that for about 4 years, worked with Mr. Gordon. And I'll have to tell you that I started practicing it, and he would have an assignment every week, and week 2, and week 3, and week 4, all the way through. And after about 6 months, people who sat in front of me turned around and said, "You're getting better. What are you doing?" So if you discipline yourself and really work on the Claude Gordon technique, it will make you a better player. So I really do believe in it, and I still do many of the things that he taught me. So you want to learn all the basics, and then just say you decide to specialize and become an orchestral musician. But let's face it, if you're going to become a jazz musician, you have a lot of different techniques you have to specialize in there. Or if you're going to become a teacher, thank goodness for all you teachers here, because I'll tell you, I had a fantastic high school band director, and I don't know that I'd be here if he hadn't taken an interest in me and hadn't really had us play really great music in the band. It was a small band, just like 60 people. It was a small high school. I had 60 people in my class. So half the class or less played in the band. But, don't ever minimize or thinking in mind about, I couldn't play professionally, so I have to teach. Teaching is so important, so don't ever put that down. It is, I can't tell you how important it is. Get a good foundation while you're in high school. So jazz, teacher in high school, teacher in college, it's all very important. So we're talking about more specialized training, especially if you're going to teach in a university, et cetera, et cetera. But I wanted to briefly discuss 3 areas which, in my opinion, are unique or special for orchestral players. Mastery of various pitched instruments, including the ability to transpose on each one of them at a very high level of proficiency. 2, building on the basics in order to become a team member, and in particular, rhythm. If you're in a major symphony, such as St. Louis or New York or Charlotte or Toledo, they all pay living wages. Living wage could be, I don't know, how many of you think a living wage is $20,000 or $25,000, $30,000? Okay, it's not as good as a living wage as $70,000. Okay, how about $100,000? Okay, so are you guys going to play for free? No. All right. So in a major symphony like St. Louis, there are 100 people on stage. We all have to have the same concept of rhythm, the same discipline as rhythm. So that is a basic that you cannot ignore. And then 3rd, learning the orchestral repertoire and following tradition. Now, what do I mean by tradition? Any ideas? Oh, come on. Perfect answer. First, number 1, the musical tradition. And if you're coming to St. Louis to audition, fortunately we have some recordings. You would be smart to track those down and listen to some of them. So you have an idea of the style that St. Louis would play, say, Strauss in. Well, an orchestral musician must be able to play a variety of different instruments, and particularly the principal or first chair needs to really perfect or excel on the C trumpet, D trumpet, E flat, F, G, A and B flat piccolo, and occasionally you might be asked by the composer, because it goes too low, to play a B flat trumpet. So the B flat trumpet is the instrument I play the least in performances, whereas probably many, if not all of you, play B flat trumpet most of the time. The second trumpet position, that player needs to be able to play proficiently the B flat, C, D, E flat, and probably some piccolo. You probably need to have a piccolo. If you're playing Bach, B minor masses, say, I guarantee you the first trumpet is not going to be playing that on a B flat trumpet. He or she's going to be playing it on a piccolo trumpet. You're going to be able to match probably better if you two choose to play on the piccolo trumpet. Third trumpet must be able to play on the B flat, C, D, and E flat instrument. And I throw the E flat in there because more and more the contemporary pieces that we're playing are so high and demanding that even the third trumpet has to stay way up in register, and it just makes everything more secure. The fourth player should be able to play the B flat, C, and D trumpet very proficiently, and it wouldn't hurt for them also to have the E flat. Now, each one of these instruments means that you have to be able to pick them up and transpose and look at the music that's in front of you and do it like that. So that takes practice. Thank you. I left a few words out of my speech, so once in a while I'll have to ask you. Okay. All right, the reason for using these various pitched instruments is really simple. They allow a player to perform perfectly and with confidence on any piece. By using the higher pitched instruments, the player gains in precision, tuning, accuracy, articulation, control, and dynamics. All essential factors to performing in a symphony orchestra. The player should try to eliminate all variables which prevent a perfect performance. The instrument chosen for this purpose will vary from performer to performer, but just keep in mind that the higher you play, the closer those overtones become. Also keep in mind a string player or even a string section can play incredibly soft. And you have to come in on a high A flat or a high B flat, and you know, you're, as I say to some people, you're going to get the napalm. Okay? Too soft. You haven't played the note, you know, and you're getting this. I hate that. Let me play the note, then tell me I'm too loud, you know, but don't give me the napalm too soon. All right. In order to play the various pitched instruments, it's essential a student knows how to transpose. How many of you here know how to transpose? Cool, that's great, wonderful. Now the big questions: how to learn the high-pitched instruments and learn how to transpose while playing them. You know, first you need to review the basic elements on each instrument, using as many different instruments each day. So I have about 3 or 4 instruments when I'm practicing, and just sometimes, just for the fun of it, I'll pick them up and play a different passage. Even though I don't plan to use this instrument on that passage, I'm practicing my transposition technique. So when I get in the concert, and the tempo might be a whole lot faster than I was anticipating, and I can see that my confidence level is going to go up if I play this on the D trumpet versus the C, or if I pick up the E flat or F trumpet. I've already practiced that way, so I can do it with confidence and just play without fear. Oops, forgot about that, sorry. All right, so you probably know some of the books that are good. The books I worked on are the Williams Method of Transposition, the Soch book. And to be very honest with you, I started my transposition experience in church, playing from the hymnal. So it's very simple. Just pick anything. It could be just even a vocal song, and just pick it up and play it in different keys. All right. So you must achieve a very high level in this field, and that takes practice. And the most standard transposition you'll come across are C, D, E flat, E, F, A, and a little H trumpet. Anybody know what H trumpet is? B natural, that's right, very good. Thank you, Donna. For a more advanced challenge, I'd recommend the Bordoni studies. Now, do you have the, did you have the handout? Everybody have the handout? No one has a handout. Okay. How many of you know the Bordoni studies? Okay, 2 or 3, 4, 5 hands. All right, let me just explain it to you while we're getting these passed out. And number 8 is what I chose to copy, and I don't know, somehow the right side got cut off, so it's a little incomplete, but use your imagination. You can do a little improvising when it disappears, but it starts in A trumpet. Then it goes to D in the second line. Then it goes to E in the third line. Back to D, back to E in the fifth line, etc. So, if you don't know how to transpose, you're going to be a little stumped about what to do. Now, I have a C trumpet. Anybody out there have that back page yet? All right, it starts in A trumpet. The first note is a grace note. It's a printed E flat. I have the C trumpet here. What's my first note? F? A trumpet, and I have a C trumpet. What's my first note? C, right. And the long glasses, okay. Sorry about this. Now the D, it cuts off. Now the E trumpet. Okay, so now I would pick up my D trumpet. So if you bear with me, pretend like this is a D trumpet. Now my first note is going to be a B flat. Well, because I'm playing a D trumpet, now it says trumpet and D. I don't have to transpose. Now it's E. Okay, you get the picture. So now you pick up your E flat trumpet. Now you pick up your F trumpet. You go through these whole series of etudes, and believe me, by the time you get to the end of this book, you are going to be a very proficient transposition expert. And I just can't tell you the number of times this has saved my life or my assistant's life or the second or third trumpet player in the St. Louis Symphony. We think, wow, that'll work great on F. You know, and we pick up the F trumpet. The other problem we have is that we don't sometimes have a lot of time to perfect something in, let's say on the B flat trumpet that lies around a high C, high D, because every week we have a new contemporary piece that's just as difficult as the week before. So as we're practicing, we also try to figure out ways to cut down on the amount of time that we're struggling to learn something. If it lies better on the F or lies better on the D trumpet, you just pick it up, try it, it clicks instantly, and we just saved ourselves a lot of worry and stress by being able to use that skill of transposing. All right. Now, most students start on the B flat trumpet or the cornet, and a lot of us were not introduced to a C trumpet until the university or college level. Anybody else like that here? Yeah, I didn't start playing C trumpet until I got in my freshman year in college. So when you've been playing different pitched instruments, one other thing in the orchestra you want to do is be able to pick up an instrument that's a higher pitched instrument from the B flat and make it sound like the B flat trumpet. So if I had other instruments here, I'd show you what I do, but I play the B flat trumpet, I listen to that sound, the richness of the sound. I pick up the C and play exactly the same concert pitches. So if I started on an F, or say a concert F on the B flat trumpet, I'd pick up the C trumpet and play an F concert. Then I'd pick up the D trumpet, matching the B flat trumpet sound, and play a concert F, which would be what note? So you're going to learn to transpose where you want to or not today. It'd be an E flat. Then if I pick up the E flat trumpet from a concert F, it's a minor third lower. That's a D natural. All the time going back to the B flat, picking it up, listening to that sound, getting it into my mind, getting it into my ear, and then picking up the E flat trumpet. And I want it to sound just as broad and rich as the B flat trumpet. Therefore, a little trick Bernie Edelstein taught me was, if you make all your instruments the same color, in other words, silver plating, gold plating, lacquer, you can pick them up, and the conductor doesn't say, I like the yellow one. I like the yellow one better. Yeah. So if they're all silver or they're all gold-plated, etc., then you don't run into that so much. It was pretty funny because Zuckerman was with us. Pinkus Zuckerman is a conductor and violinist. And we were doing the Pulcinella Suite, Stravinsky. And I was playing it on my D trumpet. I have a kind of a Yamaha, more of a humble, more Haydn E flat, we'll say, a smaller belled instrument. But I like the compactness of it. Plus, it's a chamber orchestra, so I don't need to blow everyone away. I just need to be able to fit in and be very compact with the sound. So I was playing another instrument, and I went back to the D and was trying it, and we played this passage again, and we played it again, and played it again, and I'm going to stay on the D, and he looked back and said, I like the instrument you used just a second ago. Thinking, wow, what's he thinking? I just used this instrument a second ago. So he thought he saw me change, and he thought he liked that one better, and I said, this is what I used just a second ago, and it really was, you know. But I always remember what Bernie told me, in case you get in that situation, you might want to make all your bells the same color so they can't tell when you change. All right. And now we get to transposition. Well, let me just finish up this one issue here. So you've mastered all of the instruments, you've mastered the transposition. Now you're getting ready to play Mahler 5. It's written for B-flat trumpet. A lot of people start that on the C trumpet, and the first note is a C sharp. We have all that tubing, and you're supposed to start very softly, and it's difficult to get a low C sharp to speak softly. It's even difficult to get an E flat on a B flat trumpet to speak softly and accurately. But if you pick up the D trumpet, what do we have now? We have a B natural. It's very small added amount of tubing. That note will pop out just like that. So that's another reason to try and experiment. See what you can come up with on your own about using higher, different pitched instruments. Okay, so we've mastered transposition, and personally I use the interval transposition over the clef. Anybody here use clef transposition? It's fine. I just started as a kid using the interval, and that's what I stuck with. But whatever's easier for you, you can just move the clef around, and sometimes that works even better for some people. So another tool that really helped me as a young person, and even just a few weeks ago, is trying to listen to myself more. Now, I'm still in the old school. I still use a tape recorder, okay? Sorry about that. Anybody here not know what a tape recorder is? All right. Well, I have a special tape recorder by Super Scope, and it will slow down. I can slow down the speed of it by about half, or I can switch and make it twice as slow, which gets down like that, okay? But if I'm working on a technical passage, I take myself, then I slow it down so I can hear it. If I can't hear that, I make it twice as slow. And many times, the place where I thought I was having trouble, I thought definitely I'm messing it up right there. So I listened to it, and lo and behold, it's the note before or the note after. So not always what you think is the trouble spot. Technically, it might be something else. So I find this a great tool. Of course, the metronome and a tuner. So all of these I use in my personal practice, even now. In particular, if we're going to record something, because I want to make sure that I'm playing in tune with myself. So if I can play in tune with myself, chances are I can play in tune with my colleagues on stage. Now, I suppose we talked about rhythm being so important, and contemporary music becoming more and more complex. I just think it's vital with contemporary music that you know how to break down these complex measures. Treat the rhythm or the measure like it's a math problem, so that you can clearly see where each beat and subdivision falls. Guessing will not work if you want to be in a major symphony. You need to come to that audition ready to play every note perfectly, rhythmically, so that you can really lay it out for us. Because if it's a first trumpet position, people want to know if they can grab a hold of that and that they can follow you. If you're a little wishy-washy with the rhythm, then they're going to say, well, thank you very much. Bring in the next person. So you need to be very, very disciplined with your rhythm. Very, very, very important. You know, a soloist or a recitalist, I think, they have some very, very technical things, but they also have an accompanist, a pianist usually, who can really follow them and stay with them. So even sometimes my rhythm is not as good on a recital maybe as I want it to be, but the pianist will cover for me and make adjustments so that it makes me sound good. But if I'm in the orchestra, I don't have that luxury. So discipline is really important when your rhythm is concerned. While you're playing around with these different pitched instruments, throw that tuner on, because when you change, sometimes something that was low on one instrument is high on another. It's not always consistent. So just be really aware of what you're doing. So now we've conquered transposition, right? Rhythm, intonation. What else could be left? That's tradition, or the style that you play the music in. It's highly important for an orchestra audition that you know how a piece goes. So tradition is what we call the generally accepted way of performing a particular excerpt. How you learn to perform the orchestra excerpts in a traditional way? Listen to recordings. Listen to more than one recording of each work. And sometimes, at least years ago, when there weren't as many recordings available, you would listen to certain recordings of excerpts. And the one that comes to mind, which is probably not even available anymore, is Mahler Symphony No. 3. Excuse me. And the off-stage solo? It's a beautiful solo. The performance by the New York Philharmonic with Leonard Bernstein conducting is John Ware playing the off-stage solo. So I am guessing, at least during my time when I was playing auditions, that conductors would buy this recording, and that's what they heard. That's what the trumpet players heard in the section. So when you come out on stage, you need to have an awareness of what is the ongoing interpretation. So Johnny Ware's a really good one to start with, and I suppose the New York Philharmonic, maybe with Phil Smith was also recorded in Mark 3, so that would be another one to get and try. The auditions committee are also familiar with, like I said, the recording. And if you deviate too far from the traditional interpretation, it will make you appear that you don't know how this is supposed to go, that you don't have a clue how this should be played. You could play every note, there's no doubt about it. But if you don't play it in the correct style, then you're not going to fit in with the St. Louis Symphony or the New York Philharmonic or the Charlotte Symphony. Their standards are no lower than our standards, okay? So don't think for a second that you can just scoop by on tradition and skip that part of learning. You need to stick with it and do a lot of listening. While you're doing that listening, if you can get a score, that is also very helpful. Listening is probably the next best thing to actually performing a piece. But about 4 weeks ago, I went to the International Women's Brass Conference and found another tool that is, I think, is actually incredible, just phenomenal. And it's produced by a company called Ivasi. I know you can't see that from here. It's I-V-A-S-I. And you can go online and put, www.ivasi and take a look at it. It is a conductor basically following a CD. And the reason I was so enamored with it was two reasons. One, it made me feel like I was playing the piece. I was watching it. I felt myself getting ready to play. I felt the adrenaline start to flow. I thought, this is awesome. I grew up on a farm in Indiana. So we had one classical recording when I was growing up. That was Tchaikovsky's Symphony No. 4. So I didn't have a lot of exposure to classical music when I was growing up. A lot of gospel music and one classical piece. But I loved it. It just really caught my imagination. Now, if I could have had this tool when I was a child, I could have played with an orchestra. I know it sounds kind of silly, but it really does work. And if we could just have a little demonstration, and I'll just get my little orchestra fixed here now that I'm retired, I have to find other ways of playing with an orchestra. Okay. Now, if you ever decide to purchase this DVD has Don Juan, Eulenspiegel, The Firebird Suite, and Wagner's The Rhine Journey. One size the DVD. You can purchase another DVD that has all of the brass parts. So as you could hear, the trumpets were playing on the tape. So if you don't have trumpet 2 and 3, or trombone 2 and 3, or horn 2, 3, and 4, you can still play the piece with just one horn and one trumpet. Or, better yet, you could play second trumpet. Or even better yet, you could play third trumpet. Because not every opening in the St. Louis Symphony is going to be principal trumpet. There's one person per part, first, second, third, fourth. There are 30 orchestras that pay a decent wage, some of it a little less decent than others, maybe $30,000 versus, say, Boston or Chicago Symphony, which is around $120,000. Okay, so, so 30 times 4, let's say, each of those orchestras have 4 people playing in them. It's 120 positions. Not a lot of opportunity to play. So it's a highly, it takes a lot of skill to do it. But don't stop your dream if that's what you want to do. Because that's what you want to do and that's what you feel you should do. Pursue that. Keep after it. Because there's also a lot of orchestras that are exceedingly good, like the Evansville Philharmonic. It doesn't pay a living wage per se. It's an excellent orchestra. And they need good trumpet players, or they need good trombones, etc. So I highly recommend this, and I hope that you'll look into it. I just discovered it. They haven't been around too long. In addition to that, I told you they have a DVD of all the parts. You can also just buy the trumpet parts, or just buy the horn parts. So there's a lot of possibilities there. All right, one last suggestion. If you're serious about becoming a professional musician, you need to attend some summer music festivals. And this will give you the opportunity to compare how you stack up against other trumpets, horns, trombone, tuba players from around the country, and sometimes from around the world. So if you could keep this in mind, Tanglewood, where the Boston Symphony is, that's excellent. Aspen is mostly, faculty is mostly from Juilliard. The Brevard Music Center, which is just north of here. The Blossom Music Festival, where the Cleveland Orchestra is. There's a National Orchestra Institute. All of these look good on something we're going to talk about in a minute called your resume. It shows that you played an audition and you qualified and got into one of these music festivals. That already says you're a notch or two better than some of the other people that might be applying for a job. So they look at your resume and say, oh, they went to Tanglewood and they went to Aspen. Ah, Brevard Music Center, that's good. So it shows that you were interested enough to pursue that and that you were chosen to be a part of that festival. Of course, an alternate that you could use is what you're doing right now. This is good that you're here today at this seminar. So I commend you all for coming out, and that I'm taking a lot away with me from what I heard this morning. And now that we've talked about all this other stuff, now you're prepared and you're ready to take an audition. So you have the handout now. See the page that says International Musician Ad. All right? This is an ad that was put out for my opening in St. Louis. I told them a year ago that I was going to retire. They put the ad out, I think, in November of last year. They held the auditions in February and March, and did not make a decision or couldn't find a person that they thought would fill my shoes. So this coming year, the assistant principal will assume the position of acting principal, and that's Tom Drake. Tom Drake used to play first in the North Carolina Symphony. So there you go. So when they send it out, it'll come out in something like this, called the International Musician. So why doesn't somebody from this side and somebody from this side come grab these, and you can have them to pass around and look at. now you get this ad, and you can go online, thank you, and see what else is available by getting into the AFFM website or other. You can actually go to the Saint Louis Symphony website and check out on some of the auditions and the openings that we have. But you need to write a personal letter, and basically it would say, I see you have a position for, name the position, and that I saw it in the, wherever you saw it, and that tells them that their ad was effective. That's why you want to make sure you mention where you saw the ad. Enclosed is my resume, my qualifications. Please send me a repertoire list and an appointment date and time. I look forward to your early reply or a quick response or whatever. Very, very brief letter. Then you want to put together a resume. Now help me out. I have not put together a resume for a long time. What would you put on it? Would you start with your name? Okay. What else? I know I'm supposed to be telling you, but I want to make sure you're still awake. Education, very good. How about professional experience? Now, what is the difference between an amateur experience and professional experience? Money, right? So professional experience, you get paid to play. An amateur experience is just experience. So don't put down your high school band, and maybe not even your college or university orchestra. But if you subbed for the Greenville Symphony, that means you probably got paid something. Put that down. If you subbed with the Charlotte Symphony, that's probably a step up in terms of recognition amongst the symphony world. But then put that down. Okay? Okay. So anything you got paid to do. Recordings, if you've made a CD, put that down that you made a CD. Or that you played on a CD recording with the North Carolina Symphony. That's important. Etc. Education. Any awards, if you actually won a competition, put that down. Then you'll get a response from the orchestra. Dear Allison, I am pleased to invite you to the preliminary auditions for Principal Trumpet vacancy with the Saint Louis Symphony Orchestra. This position will begin, and they'll give you a date. So you can read all of this. But get down to the third paragraph. It says the application for audition form and preference date to audition should be returned with an audition deposit check at $50. Now, why would they do that? They're lucky that you're coming. Well, in the past, we've had a lot of cancellations. And they want to know that you're serious. So if you're going to come, you send them $50. If you come to the audition and show up, they give you back the $50. Either they give you a new check or they hand you back your check. But you get the money back. All you have to do is show up. If you can't come because of illness, call them as soon as you know you can't come. Say, I'm so sorry. They may even ask you for a doctor's, but probably not. Probably not. But just tell them you're sorry, you're ill, you can't come. They'll send you back your money. If you do not call and you do not show up, you will not get your money back. Our fee is $50. You get it back. I think New York and other places now are charging $100. They want to make sure that you're not going to waste the committee's time by us scheduling a slot for you and then you decide not to come. So that's part of the reason for that. Then you receive this application form. You've got that in front of you. And it's asked for musical references. If you have a conductor, that's good, that you can ask to write a reference for you. Or basically it'll be a phone call. So when you talk to the person, you say, Jeff, can I use you for a reference? And it says that they may call you. You know, if I get far enough in the process, they may call you and ask, what am I like to work with? Lots of times we don't bother with it. But sometimes, you know, you get a person who has a reputation of being difficult to deal with. It's not always that person's fault. Sometimes they were mistreated in their previous job, and they reacted in a negative way. And so you say, okay, this person's really a good player, and if we treat them with respect they should respond with respect to us. And it always works. If you treat them with disrespect, then you're creating a negative situation, and you can expect it to become kind of explosive. So they'll call somebody, and then that conductor or Jeff will say, yeah, I've worked with Susan. Wow, you don't want her. Or, she was really difficult. She was very demanding. Or, yeah, it was cool. So, choose your references wisely. That's the other part. Then in St. Louis, we send you a form and says, yeah, we'd like to come audition. We have 3 dates here. Why don't you pick number 1, 2, 3, and tell us what you'd like to do. So you pick if you're out of the country, you want to pick the date that's the closest to the finals. So if you make the finals, you don't have to make a second trip back to the United States. If you live here and you like to go early, pick the earliest date. Or if you want to get as close as you can to the final round, then make the 14th, in this case March 14th, your number 1 choice. February 22nd, your number 2 choice, etc. So, then you get another letter back say, I'm confirming your audition, and it's such and such time and such and such date. Now, you should come to a 3 list, I guess it is. One is the Principal Trumpet list from the Saint Louis Symphony. It's very long. And it's funny because you look at some of these pieces, and I know they're not going to have time to hear everything. And sometimes they make the list long to weed people out. I know, for instance, we had, what did we have? I guess it was the second trumpet opening back around 2001 or so. The current gentleman who's playing second trumpet is Josh McClure. Well, he came to that audition, and he didn't think that we would be asking for such and such piece in the preliminary round. Well, this particular piece was by Prokofiev. It's called Cinderella, and it had a really low kind of finger twister in the low register. Of course, you're looking for second trumpet. You want somebody who can play the low register well. Well, he didn't think we'd ask for that, so we asked for that piece, and of course, he couldn't play it. He hadn't spent any time on it yet, so we disqualified him. Targa Larson won the audition that year. I think it was around 2001. Targa now is the 4th trumpet in the Chicago Symphony. So we're able to attract really good players. This next time around, Josh came back and he learned everything this time. And he was in the finals and he actually won the job. But he tells his story on himself, so I'm not letting out any kind of a little secret on Josh. He said, ha ha ha, I didn't prepare the first time, but I got it this time. So always go prepared. And don't assume they're not going to ask something, because they probably will. Now, if you just could kind of look at these 3 lists, you notice we have St. Louis Symphony, that's first trumpet. I included an old list from the Hong Kong Philharmonic, and Gallant teaches up at North Carolina School for the Arts, Judy Saxton. She was principal trumpet in the Hong Kong Symphony for like 4 or 5 years. That's a very good orchestra. And sometimes sometimes you don't feel you're making headway here. Try a foreign orchestra, because you can get a lot of experience and it might be just the right fit. So again, don't give up on your dream. Look at those 2 lists and then come to the 3rd one, the San Francisco Symphony. Look at the date. October 18, 19, and November 15th are the audition dates, and look at the year, 2010. So if you were thinking about taking that audition in San Francisco, you've got the audition list right here. Now, look at it very carefully. Notice they're asking for some first trumpet repertoire. The very first piece I see is Mahler Symphony No. 5. Now let me look at Hong Kong. Mahler Symphony No. 5. Now let me look at St. Louis. Mahler Symphony No. 5. These are really standard pieces. So compare these 3 lists. Pick out the ones that are occur most often, and make that your starting point for learning the literature. And learn all of the parts, not just the first trumpet part. Then going back to the San Francisco list, this is a 3rd trumpet opening. So you see the repertoire for second trumpet, but sometimes the 3rd player moves up and plays second, so the second player can have a rest. And 3rd trumpet opening, 3rd trumpet literature. So that is what I have to share with you in that category. The last thing is, right up here and right over there on the piano, is an AFFN, American Federation of Musicians, wage chart. So I brought them. You're welcome. There's not a lot of them, but you're welcome to take them and look at them. And I don't want them back. Just take them with you. Also, there's an organization called the International Conference of Symphony and Opera Musicians. This was an organization that brought together all of the orchestras, especially those negotiating contracts. They shared information about what they're going to ask for. They shared information about how to approach the management to try and get a better contract. That's over there. And now the last thing, and we'll open up for questions. What is the audition committee looking for? Number one is consistency. Consistency in what? Rhythm, intonation, with yourself in particular. If you can't play in tune with yourself, if you can't play an interval of a third or a fifth, you need to work on that. It's important. The sound of the orchestra. For years, the sound of, let's say, the Boston Symphony was considered a French style or brighter. New York, my interpretation, but was a little more strident sound, or a little more brassy. St. Louis would probably have a warmer sound, almost closer to a cornet versus a trumpet sound. And then, of course, the interpretation or tradition of the music. When you're playing the pieces, you want to be able to present to us, the committee, the fact that you have played this piece. And the only person you may have played this piece is with Ivasi, right up there, what we did earlier. But when you're playing, you need to help us sense that we're in the middle of the orchestra, getting ready to perform with you. You're capturing our imagination about how well you know the piece and how well you can present yourself in the audition. So if you can do that, then you've got a real good chance of advancing. And if you can advance, you have a good chance of winning the job. And if you don't advance, does that mean that you failed? Not in my estimation. For me to fail is to not to try. And that, to me, is the real failure. It's not putting yourself out there and trying. Every time I took an audition, I learned a great deal about what I was doing. In the preparation, it made me a better player. So the same thing is true, whether you're playing a recital or you're playing an orchestral audition. You're going to end up being a better player because of the discipline you put in to learning these pieces. And the last thing I want to tell you about, two things. How to practice. I came up with a thing many years ago, and that was that I would play something perfectly 3 times, like a little contract with myself. I'm going to play the opening of Pictures on Exhibition perfectly 3 times. And that means that I can't take it at a tempo that's too fast for me, but at a tempo that I know I can play that perfectly. And gradually increase that tempo and play it perfectly 3 times. And when you get into a recording session, you're going to notice that there are several takes of a piece. And sometimes things happen, like, this microphone sitting here. Somebody accidentally walks past and brushes the cord, and the cord falls out. And you play through the opening of, we'll say Pictures, what we're just talking about. You play it 3 times, and say, okay, let's take a break, and we'll go listen. So we go to the listening room, and we get down there, and everybody's looking at me like, thinking, wow, didn't I play well? And they said, no, you sounded great. You sounded great, but the microphones weren't plugged in. You have to play it 3 more times. Well, 3 more times can be 6 times, or 9 times, or 12 times. And I tell myself, I can play it 3 times perfect, and I just have to play it 1 more time. They say, let's go back again. I can play it 3 times perfect, and I just have to play it 1 more time. I will do this. It's kind of similar to me, like the old biblical story about the disciples are in the boat, and it's a big storm, and the waves are crashing over, and everybody's saying, oh my gosh, where's our Lord, And then they look out, and they see Christ coming to them, and Peter gets in the boat, and Peter look around and say, oh my goodness, look at those waves, I'm not going to do it. Peter starts walking on the water. I can do this. Peter had at some point to say in his mind, I can do this. So if I can play it 3 times perfectly, then I have to say, I will do this. I will do this. I can do it. I have to get to the point where I say, I can do it. Then I get to the point where I say, I will do this. It really is a mindset. And the very last thing I'm going to tell you, then I'll be quiet and you can ask questions. Sometimes, has anybody ever been called down, so to speak, by the conductor saying, horns, you're late, trumpet, you're late, low brass, you're late? Anybody? We all have. I figured out a way to practice that. And I think I've recently shared that with a fellow colleague who's out on the audition circuit, was playing extra with us, and I kept thinking, what's going on here? Something's not quite right. And I finally figured out that he would just start that much too late with the rest of us, just a tad late. So I shared this with him, and I said, and I have a way of practicing that might help. And he said, fine, I'd like to know. I didn't want to go any further if he didn't want to know, but he said, yes, I'd like to know. So what I do, about, say, 10 or 20 feet from you, 15, whatever you want to start with, I have a metronome. It's a chord that will make an audible sound, a tick-tock, tick-tock, and has a light, a visual image. So I put over here, about 10 feet away. I'm watching, and I hear it, and I put my tape recorder right beside it. Let's pretend like this is a metronome. I put the microphone right on top of the metronome. All over here, 10 feet away. Then I start with a whole note. Believe it or not, if you think about it, most of our attacks are late because of a whole note or a half note. Because sometimes we just get caught up in that sound. We go, oh, and the poor strings are going, so if you have the metronome over here, it's going tick, 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 and you go, wah. So we have, no. It's going to sound on the metronome or on the tape recorder when you play it back. Obviously, you tape yourself. Ba, ba. And what you learn is, I have to anticipate more. How much? That's what takes the practice. Ba, ba. Now to you, right now, I'm way ahead. 10, 15, 20, 30, 50 feet, how far away the conductor is, it sounds on time to them. So start out with 10 feet, you get that down, go to half notes, go to quarter notes, go to eighth notes, go to da-da-da-da, da-da-da-da, something that starts after the beat, etc. And that will fix or help your lateness problem. Okay, thank you all very much. If you have any questions, I'll do my best to answer them. Well, interval, if you take, what is your instrument? Trumpet. All right. If you take the third space C on the, you know if you're playing a B flat trumpet and you're playing, the pianist is playing a C on the piano, what note do you have to play? You have to play a D. The B flat trumpet's a whole step lower than the piano, so you have to move the interval up a whole step. So if the piano's playing a C, you play a D. Okay? Now the clef transposition, I'm not as skilled at, but it'd be similar to a trombonist tends to play alto or tenor clef. They move the keys, not the keys, the clef sign. We have treble clef, okay? We know alto clef, I think, is any trombonist here? No trombonist? Is it the third? Yeah, third line on the clef, and then tenor is the fourth line. Okay, so if you could read clefs, and it said X transposition, you knew that would be alto clef for the trombone, except you're playing trumpet. Then you could put the clef sign in your mind, move the clef sign to that third line. Okay?
This is just a curiosity question. On the San Francisco list, it lists Bruckner Symphony No. 7, and it says there's footnote to be played on rotary trumpet. So when you go to an audition, you're expected to have every instrument, if they ask for
that case, I would call and say, well, I can play rotary trumpet, but I do not own one. May I play your instrument? And usually, the orchestra lots of times will own the instruments. Chicago Symphony has a set of rotary trumpets that they use. Saint Louis Symphony has Gonters that we have used over the years. So, and sometimes they say, well, no, we don't own them, but probably somebody from the section can bring one. Because you know, the airlines will only let you bring so much on to the airplane. Then you don't really want to send your instruments through baggage. And when you're packing your instruments, just in case you might have to put it through baggage, lots of times there's this little gap between the bell and the part of your case. So there's just a little space where it can bounce around. Put some bubble wrap around that bell so it won't move. Because I guarantee you, whether on purpose or by accident, something's going to slip out of somebody's hand. And for instance, Jeannie Little, our trombonist, just bought a new bell for her trombone. She opened it up when she got here, and the bell has a ripple in it because somehow it got dropped on its bell. She thought she had a really good case. It's the first time it ever happened, but there was just a little gap where it would move. So if you put bubble around it, that impact, the bubble will break, but your bell won't give. And just a word to the wise, check it out very carefully before you get on that plane and make sure, because, you know, lots of times they look at it, if you're short like me, I said, that won't fit under the seat, and you know, you put it under there several times. But because I'm short, it looks like it's not going to fit under the seat. So I try to carry the case over here so they can't look at it too well. Hand them my ticket. So anyway, but lots of times the orchestra will have rotary trumpets, and you can use theirs.
Now that you mention it, what are, do you have any other suggestions or things that you've learned from traveling that might be helpful? How do you pack efficiently when you have to carry multiple instruments? What if you want to, as you said, try to avoid baggage as much as you can?
Well, in the orchestra, we have trunks, and you can put again, we put our cases into the trunk, and we've discovered, one time we went to Japan, the third trumpet had to play piccolo trumpet on a piece. And I'm sorry I don't remember the piece right now, but it was a very high third trumpet part. And he gets to Japan, he takes his bell out, and it has a terrible, terrible dent in it. It's piccolo, you know. And he tries to play it, and it won't respond properly. So we somebody rushed it over to the Yamaha factory there in Japan and fixed it for him. But if the orchestra has trunks, just put everything in the trunk that you can, and again, put bubble wrap around the bell so it won't move. Because again, they say, oh no, we don't put those trunks on the edge or we don't flip them. You say, well, how come is this slide falling out if you didn't flip it? Because that's the only way it could have fallen out. You know, so your stage hands don't do that, but other people who handle the instruments, whether, of course, on a trip to Japan, we had to take the airplane, and lots of people handle those cases, so you just have to try to protect yourself as much as possible. There are quad cases and triple and quad cases that really fit nicely under the seat and will fit easily overhead. So look into those. You might have to pay $300 or $400 for it, but frankly, I think it's worth it before you get there and open your case and find the bell's damaged because you had to put it underneath in baggage. So a little bit of expenditure in terms of cost and buying a case that's going to help protect your livelihood, really. Your instrument is your livelihood. So it's worth that.
Question. When you've played all these years, I'm sure there are times when you've had chop issues or it just wasn't working. You get up the next morning to play, it's like, man, this is my mouthpiece or whatever. Can you share a story of one of those moments where you were put in a position where you had to play and chop? What did you do to compensate for that problem? A lot of us here who play, I'm sure, can say that, oh man, I don't feel good today or whatever, something's wrong here. Could you elaborate on that a little bit?
Well, it's interesting. I think one of the things that you could do that would be most helpful is that when you pick up your instrument and it just doesn't feel right and things aren't responding the way they need to, try just doing some relaxation exercises. Because the opposite happens. You get more and more uptight because you can't get something to work the way you want. If it's not working, I put the horn down, I come back in half an hour and start my warm-up again. And lots of times it'll be just fine then. I know there's a story about, I can give you two stories. There's one about Bud Hearses. He was playing the Brandenburg in Carnegie Hall. And Charlie Geyer told me this, and he said they got there and Bud could not get a note out. He thought, oh my gosh, what's he going to do? Well, this is Carnegie Hall. So he watched Bud, and Bud put his horn down and just kind of closed his eyes. And a half an hour later, he had to play the Brandenburg, and it was beautiful. So Charlie had to know, what did you do? How did you pull it off? I heard you warming up. It didn't sound very good. So Bud said, you know, I thought about every performance I'd have of the Brandenburg and how beautifully it sounded, how great I felt, and how wonderful it all came out. And so he did visualization. So that's very helpful. Visualize being successful. If you're preparing for a recital, don't say, oh my gosh, here comes the Halsey Stevens or whatever piece you're playing, the Haydn, and say, oh, I hope I get this out, I hope I get that down. Now you need to spend a lot of time not thinking negatively. You need to spend a lot of time thinking positively. All the times that that note came out for you, all the times that passage went perfectly. Just relax and think about that, and then play with confidence. I think Bud was right. Visualization of being successful in your performance is very important. You know, I could still be dwelling on the fact I sounded like a junior high player in Milwaukee, but I didn't. I said, all right, I have 2 more auditions. I'll do the best I can. And it worked out that I won a job and was able to go on from there. So.
Can you tell us some of the trumpet players you like to listen to?
Some of the trumpet players
You like to listen to?
I love listening to Bud Hearses. And of course, you have to remember the Fritz Reiner recordings back in the 60s and 70s were probably the premier brass section at that time. I particularly liked the sound, I liked the energy they played with, and a lot of that had to do with the conductor. A lot of that had to do with the principal trumpet and the style that he played with, leading the brass section. Right now, it's going to sound a little conceited, but I really prefer the Saint Louis Symphony brass sound, because we have a very warm sound. If we have to be in your face with the sound, we can. But generally speaking, we try to figure out what the music calls for. Sometimes it calls for it to be very harsh and nasty, and we can do that too. But that's not a lot. Most of the time it is a little more warm sounding, especially if we're doing Mahler, Shostakovich, Prokofiev. It's just such a warm sound. And a lot of times some of that sound is built from the bottom, from the tuba. You get that very warm sound, especially in Bruckner. Love to play Bruckner because it's just a big fat organ sound, so to speak. You try to think like an organ would sound. All the voices are equal versus So, but the old recordings, I think the Chicago Symphony was my favorite. Okay, uh-huh.
I find playing the C trumpet very challenging. And I play, I feel well on the D trumpet. Do you have any suggestions or comments on that? That never
Sometimes it's a simple change of a lead pipe or a reverse tuning crook, or like some of my mouthpieces, I've used the shanks for years and years, and they go in a little bit too far. So suddenly notes that were okay a few years ago are getting sharper and sharper. Oh, what's going on? So I put a little masking tape on, and it keeps it from going in so far. Then I hear a difference. Then I realize I need a new shank on my mouthpiece. So don't be afraid to try different equipment. I have a Edelstein lead pipe on my box C trumpet, large bore, 239 bell. I like the 239 bell because I have a tendency, or I can have a tendency, for my sound to spread a little bit, and the 239 bell helps me to focus that. have a very rich, I think, and warm sound. So I don't really need the 229 bell to add warmth to my sound, but I need the 239 bell to add focus to my sound and help me there. I play a 1.5 C mouthpiece. I guess 7 or 8 years ago, up to then, I played a 1 1/4, and I felt more comfortable on the 1.5. So, you know, you're never too old to switch or learn. All right, we're just about out of time. One last question.
Is there one significant takeaway from your study with Claude Gordon that stands out in your mind as you benefited from?
Well, I went to Claude because I was not satisfied with my upper range. And I figured there was something that I was missing and not understanding. I think one of the keys was, he said, you know, the airplane example he gives, I don't know if you've gotten to the airplane example yet, but tongue determines pitch. And, you know, I would say, let's go up to a high C. Bum, 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 bum. We know that's not a high C, but with my voice, you're not going to hear a high C. So bum, 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 bee, and I'd fall down to the B flat. And I couldn't understand what was going on, you know. And so I played something, and eventually that happened. I thought, very simple. Your tongue just slipped. You had the high C. Obviously, you can hit it. But when you added the crescendo of the air, it blew the tongue out of position. So then I grasped that, you know, I could really play those notes. I just had to lock that position in. So one of the exercises he had me do was to play up to, let's say, I think it was a high A flat, concert G flat, maybe on the B flat trumpet, or on the C trumpet, and holding that note, he said, now, try to play an octave lower without moving the tongue. So I did, and of course I couldn't go anywhere. Then he said, now, try to hold that note and let the tongue drop, and of course I couldn't hold the note. So I think that was one of the key things that I learned. That tongue determines pitch, and all the benefits of playing the Clark studies. The K tongue was the other thing. Doing a lot of K tongue totally improved and made stronger my double tongue and triple tongue. So there are a lot of pluses that I got from him. Plus, he was just a wonderful gentleman. He had, I can't remember what year it was, I think it was 84, and I was going to fly out after a concert in St. Louis to take a lesson from him. This was Sunday night, so I was going to fly out in the evening, take a lesson on Monday. Concert was over in St. Louis. I'm, you know, on my way out the door, and the personnel manager corners me and says, "Got to call you. Got to call this number." So I called the number. It was a nurse in a hospital. She promised Mr. Gordon, as they were wheeling him to the operating room for emergency bypass surgery, that she would call and reach me before I got on the plane to go to California. You know, so I've been pretty impressed with Mr. Gordon, and it was pretty miraculous that he would go to all that effort. Well, clearly his life was in jeopardy. He's telling this nurse, "I won't go to surgery till you promise me you'll call her." And so they did. You've been a great audience. Thank you so much, and I hope you enjoyed the rest of the